What you're looking at is a depth of field effect, but instead of getting blurry, it gets more pixelated. I've been playing around with post-processing effects in the Unreal Engine, and I stumbled onto this fun combination. I had this node sequence that let me pixelate the screen, and I also had this depth buffer, which is a gradient from dark to light, or 0 to 1, showing how far away objects are in the frame. By plugging in the depth buffer to the pixelation function, you get this. It's a bit flickery, and there's some weird distortions in pixels going on, but I think this effect could be useful in, say, one of those 2.5D pixel art games like Octopath Traveler. However, this effect doesn't really fit my game, Kitten Burst, which is more based on Y2K aesthetics. In the Spider-Verse films, they have this similar weird depth of field effect, but instead of getting blurry, it does this chromatic aberration. It kind of looks like a misprint in a comic book, like the ink layers got misaligned. They also use cross-hatching stripes for shadows and half-tone dots for lights. In this recent trend of more stylized animation, people are digging up the unique artifacts of old mediums to find interesting new effects to play around with. So what's a Y2K era artifact that I could use instead of pixelation?
Video compression.
I took a look at how JPEG compression is done for reference. I like the weird blurry pixel chunks and the color banding that a heavily compressed image can make. There's a bunch of steps in JPEG compression, but the main two that cause artifacts are restricting the color space and the discrete cosine transform. Restricting the color space was easy enough. That creates this color banding since there's less colors to choose from. The discrete cosine transform is trickier. This step breaks the picture into 8x8 pixel chunks, and then for each chunk creates a table showing how different sine waves can be merged together to create something similar to that chunk. That table takes up less space than storing all the data. There's a great computer file video that goes into depth on how that all works. Instead of doing any of that, I decided to fake it. I split the picture into 8x8 chunks and then blurred each chunk to create a pretty similar effect. That script was way harder to figure out than I thought it would be. Unreal uses HLSL for its scripting, which I'm not totally familiar with. I ended up with something that's not quite right, but it looks kind of cool, so I'm keeping it. I also added 2 more additional effects to make it feel more compressed. They're not part of JPEG compression, but I'm just faking it at this point. One is the crust factor, which is just the pixelation effect again, but I multiply the color of the pixel to what's below. I also added this scanline texture to shift those pixels around to create some movement in the image. All combined, I think this gives a pretty good impression of what video compression artifacts look like or feel like, while all still running in real time. Then I just add back in the depth mask, and now we have a compression depth of field where instead of getting blurry, it gets more JPEG. I trigger this effect when you crash in game. It really sells the feeling of being stunned after crashing headfirst into a wall at 100 miles per hour. What else could we make depth of fieldy? What about instead of blurry, it gets sharper? Or instead of blurry, it looks like a painting? Or a kaleidoscope? Or instead of blurry, we chromatic the aberration, but just red and blue. Oh wait, that's just 3D glasses. It turns out you could use the depth buffer to create a pseudo 3D effect using only one camera. Here's a version where you cross your eyes and it's in 3D. I just shifted the 2 images left and right slightly, depending on the depth buffer. It's all just one camera, I only have to render the frame once. It kind of gives me a headache though. I added all these effects as hats in games so you can try them out when the full game releases. If you have any other ideas for interesting effects I could try out, let me know. I'll leave you with this. If I start cranking all the dials in the JPEG compression effect, it starts to generate some really wild glitch art. Seeing compression artifacts pushed to these limits is kinda creepy. It's like looking at a decaying photo or listening to a worn out tape recording. I'm sure the bitrate in this video is going to be terrible, but hey, that just adds to the compression, so win-win. Thanks for watching.